Good morning and welcome to you, gentlemen.
And good morning to you.
Morning.
Good morning and welcome to you, gentlemen.
Good
Good
morning.
morning.
Appreciate you letting us be here this morning.
Okay, I introduced you and I'm going to reintroduce you, gentlemen. And we have the pleasure of having the Supreme Court Justice for seat 5, the non-partisan position for candidate. We're having a candidate forum. We have two people here, the Democratic, the Justice Sam J. Ervin the fourth, and we have a Republican contender, General Counsel Trey Allen. So, and I just want to, what I'm going to do is ask both of you the same questions and give you both, I'll take turns who's going to answer first. Okay, but just feel comfortable to just have a conversation and to express yourselves. So, what I usually ask is like, what qualifies you for this particular position? And we're going to put that to the Justice Sam Ervin. You're going to ask that first. What qualifies you for this position that you're seeking?
All right, I'll be happy to talk about that. I'm from up in Morganton, which is at the foot of the mountains in western North Carolina. I'm a product of the public schools in Burke County. I graduated from Davidson College, magna cum laude, and with a degree in history. Went to law school at Harvard and graduated from there in 1981. I may have said 81 for college. That was 78. I then practiced law in Morganton for almost 18 years. I did a very wide variety of cases, tried lots of cases to juries, handled lots of appeals to the state Supreme Court and to the Court of Appeals, and addressed a lot of the different kinds of cases that the Supreme Court handles. In 1999, I was appointed by Governor Hunt to the State Utilities Commission, which is an agency that functions a lot like a court. It regulates privately owned water, natural gas, sewer, electric companies, and it also has some involvement with the home moving business. I was elected to the State Court of Appeals in 2008 and served on that body for 6 years. In 2014, I was elected to the Supreme Court, and I've served on the Supreme Court for the last 7 years, and it's 7 years, 9 or 10 months. So I believe that the reason that I'm qualified for this job is because I've got a very, very broad legal experience, have handled most of the kinds of cases that the Supreme Court addresses, and have actually served on the state Supreme Court for the past almost 8 years.
Okay. All righty. And we're going to ask the same question to you, Associate. Okay. I'm sorry. Just give me a few seconds. General Counsel Trey Allen, could you just answer the same question? What are your qualifications?
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm so happy to be here with you this morning. I grew up in rural Robeson County. I'm the first person in my immediate family to obtain a 4-year degree. I'm the first person in my extended family to obtain a law degree and to practice law. After law school, I served 4.5 years in the United States Marine Corps. Most of that was overseas. I did do a tour in Iraq. Um, as a Marine judge advocate, I prosecuted crimes. I gave commanders legal guidance on operational military justice and administrative law matters, and helped Marines with their individual legal problems. Um, and the reason I'm telling you all this is because, as you just heard, um, really you need Supreme Court justices need a broad range of experience because the range of cases the court hears is so broad. When I came back to North Carolina, I clerked for a justice on the North Carolina Supreme Court, so I got an inside view of how the court works. I then practiced law at a firm in Raleigh and became a partner there. I handled constitutional law claims, many other kinds of civil claims, slip and fall cases, contract law cases, employment law cases, in state court and federal court at the trial level and the appellate level. In 2013, I was invited to join the faculty at the UNC Chapel Hill School of Government. I've been a professor there since then, teaching and writing about various aspects of North Carolina law. I was awarded tenure and named a distinguished term professor while there. Um, in January of last year, I took leave from UNC Chapel Hill to serve as the general counsel for our court system. Our judicial branch has over 6,000 personnel. They include judges, clerks of court, magistrates, and support staff. And I run the office of lawyers who give legal guidance to court officials on criminal law matters and civil law matters. We're the attorneys for the judges. You could look at it that way. And so I think that broad legal background of not only practical experience practicing law, but also of legal scholarship would serve me well as a justice on the North Carolina Supreme Court.
Okay. So, Judge Sam Ervin, what makes you want to serve? You're now in the seat and you're looking to be reelected. What makes you want to serve?
Well, the reason that I want to serve is that I feel a very strong calling to serve the citizens of my state who have been so good to me for my entire life and have been good to my family for generations before me. I've long felt that people have an obligation to give back to their communities and their states in various ways. And in the way that I've been fortunate enough to be able to hopefully make some contribution to the state that I have lived in and loved all my life is through my work in the Utilities Commission, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court. I would like to continue doing that because I want to continue to serve the citizens of the state. I also believe that I provide a good service as a member of the Justice of the Supreme Court. Nobody is the best judge of their own qualifications, but I've got a pretty extensive record of making decisions of a judicial or quasi-judicial nature. I believe that my record shows that I fairly and impartially considered the cases that come before me. I've been very conscious of the fact that it's important to give everybody a fair hearing when they are involved in the court system, that everybody be treated equally under the law, and that nobody be deemed to be above the law. And lastly, that partisan politics has no place in our court system. And so I want to continue trying to do what I've done for the last 23 years as a member of the Utilities Commission, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court.
Okay. So the same question to you, Mr. Trey Allen. What makes you want to serve? Why is this your calling at this point?
So I married my high school sweetheart, and we have 5 children, and I very much want them to grow up enjoying the same blessings of liberty and opportunity that I've had in my life. You know, our court system is a key component of our Constitution, our constitutional structure. And you know, if you think about it, the courts don't have the enforcement powers of the executive branch. They don't have a National Guard. They don't have you know, armies of law enforcement. They don't control money like the legislature does. So at the end of the day, the authority of the court system rests on the public's trust. And I've become concerned that over the last few years, our court system, but especially the Supreme Court, has been increasingly viewed as a body that is making decisions that appear more politically motivated than determined by the law and the fact. And so, you know, if a critical mass of people, you know, loses confidence in our courts, that's a problem for our entire constitutional structure. And so I'm running to try to do what I can to increase the public's confidence in the state Supreme Court as a body that makes decisions based on the law and the fact, not based on politics.
Well, you've led me into my next question. I'll ask you, everything has become politicized. What role does party play?
Well, is that to me first? I'm sorry.
Yes, I'm sorry, Mr. Allen.
No problem. So Under current North Carolina law, we have to run as nominees of a political party. So I'm running as the Republican, and Justice Ervin's running as a Democrat nominee. And so politics inevitably is going to play a role in whoever's elected to this seat. That being said, politics should play no role in how a justice actually does his job. And as I've gone around the state campaigning, I had a primary, so I've been actively campaigning since the beginning of last year. I've told people repeatedly, be sure you vote for the legislators who are going to enact the kinds of policies you agree with, because if I'm elected to the Supreme Court, I'm going to follow the law, and it won't matter. It will be irrelevant if Democrats pass the law, Republicans pass the law. So, party does, but it should play no role in how a justice does his or her job.
Okay, Justice Ervin, the fourth, I'm going to ask you the same question. Everything has become so politicized. What role does party play for you?
And I agree with you that an awful lot has gotten politicized, and I personally think that is not good at all for the court system. When I first was elected to the Court of Appeals in 2008 and was first elected to the Supreme Court in 2014, both elections were nonpartisan rather than partisan in nature. No judge that I know of wanted partisan elections. That was something that the General Assembly decided they wanted to do. I very much believe that party affiliation has no role in determining what a judge does. That a judge's responsibility is to simply apply the law to the facts as it is revealed by the record. I've alluded to this once already, but I'll say it again. I've got a 23-year record of quasi-judicial and judicial service, and you can look at my record and you can see instances in which, even though I'm the Democratic nominee for the seat, I have ruled in favor of parties other than the ones associated with the party that I'm affiliated with. So I've got a record of doing what I say that I'm doing, which is to fairly and impartially decide each case based on the law, the facts, and nothing else. I agree that partisan politics has no place in the courts.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you, Judge Ervin, tell me exactly what kind of cases will come to the Supreme Court.
Well, the law determines what kind of cases come to our court. There's a certain number of cases. First of all, the Supreme Court is an appellate court. It reviews decisions made by lower courts. What happens in the Supreme Court is not a do-over of a trial or a complete replacement for a trial court proceeding. That's all done in the superior courts and the district courts in each individual county in the state. What we do is review those proceedings to see if there are legal errors in those cases. And so certain types of cases come directly to the Supreme Court from the trial courts. For example, if a person is convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death, that person's appeal goes directly from the Superior Court to the Supreme Court. Another example is the Utilities Commission, on which I served, decides something called a general rate case periodically, where a company comes in and asks for an overall rate change in order to improve its profitability. Appeals from Utilities Commission decisions in that kind of case go directly to the Supreme Court, don't go through the Court of Appeals. A third instance is we have in North Carolina something called the Business Court, in which complex business cases are resolved by a tribunal that consists of specially trained business judges. Those decisions come directly to the Supreme Court. Most of the remaining decisions come to us through the Court of Appeals, and the Court of Appeals is it's what's called an intermediate appellate court. I served on it for 6 years, as I've said a couple of times. It decides all other appeals first, and then the parties either have a right to appeal from the decision of the Court of Appeals if it's not unanimous. They sit in panels of 3 judges. There's 7 on the Supreme Court. We sit as a group of 7. If the panel at the Court of Appeals is not unanimous, the party that did not prevail at the Court of Appeals has a right to seek review of that decision by the Supreme Court. Even if the panel is unanimous, the decision they can ask us to take it. And the kinds of cases that we decide cover the waterfront. They're about half criminal, they're half civil. The criminal cases range from the first degree murder cases that I've already mentioned, all the way down to some certain types of traffic offenses. On the civil side, it can include medical malpractice cases, property line disputes, just a wide range of things. I know I'm going on too long, but that's a complicated subject. Let Mr. Allen fill in the gaps that I've left out.
Yeah. So, Mr. Allen, in your work experience, where is most of your experience? Where are you practicing law? Is it if you're representing a client? Where is that experience? Is it in the Supreme Court? Would you be representing somebody? Have you represented people in the Supreme Court area?
Yes. So when I mentioned earlier that I practice law and partner in a Raleigh firm, and it's a well-regarded firm, and I was actually in the education law section there. So I represented school districts around North Carolina. And the thing about the civil practice of that kind is it really covers an enormous range, because school systems, they own property, they have employees. In fact, in many counties, they're the biggest single employer. And because they're government entities, they're frequently sued in cases that allege some kind of constitutional claim, some kind of violation of constitutional rights. So I handled tort law cases, personal injury cases, contract law cases, employment law cases, and constitutional law cases. There's a pending, some of your listeners may have heard of the Leandro case, which is a case that involves the state constitutional right to the opportunity for a sound basic education. And I'm not going to talk much about that in particular, because there's a version or an offshoot of Leandro, or an iteration, I should say, of Leandro in front of the Supreme Court right now. But I did handle a case involving a Leandro style claim and student discipline, and it was about whether there's state constitutional right to alternative education when a student is suspended long-term for misconduct. So that case went to the North Carolina Supreme Court. So I was privileged to argue it there. So I had a very broad civil practice that I think is good preparation for the North Carolina Supreme Court. If I could say one more thing, I don't want to overlook the importance of what I've done as a faculty member at the School of Government. The School of Government is really a unique institution in that government officials, local government officials, and judges from across the state attend programs offered by School of Government faculty members, and they routinely ask School of Government faculty members for advice or guidance on legal issues. And they go to the school because they know that the faculty members are committed to giving excellent legal opinions that are free from any kind of partisan bias. So I have, and that's what I would do as a justice is try to determine the law as best I could, regardless of my.
Okay, so we have our first break that we're getting ready to come up with. Okay, we have two more after this, so I'm going to hold on the question because I don't want to have you start. I see both you guys know how to talk.
Well, I tell the school students that come to the court for programs that.
This is Larry Hall, former Secretary of the North Carolina Department of Military and Veterans Affairs. The time is now to increase resources for our community and advocate for what we need by voting in this election. This fall, justice is on the ballot. Elected officials can distribute the resources we need for fair elections, clean drinking water, and access to equitable education. Get 3 people from your community to vote with you. Visit ncblackalliance.org to learn more.
Election Day is November 8th. Early voting begins October 20th. Do you know the candidates who are campaigning for our vote? Awesome Radio is hosting a non-partisan candidate forum October 11th, Tuesday from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Pitt Community College, the Goes Student Center. All candidates have been invited. This candidate forum is free and open to the public. This forum is designed for voter education and for us to get to know the candidates up close and personal before we cast our vote. That's Tuesday, October 11th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Pitt Community College. If you have questions for the candidates, email them to us, admin@wbisawesomeradio.org or inbox on social media. Visit our website for more information. To volunteer for this event, contact us 252-756-3137. This is another Awesome Radio community event.
Welcome back to Meet the Candidate. My name is Renee Borston Hill, and I have the privilege and the honor and want to thank these two gentlemen for joining us here at Awesome Radio. We have the Supreme Court Justice is the position that they're running for. We have the incumbent Justice Sam J. Ervin IV, and we have General Counsel Trey Allen, who is also running in that position. I will say that Sam Ervin is a Democratic candidate, and Counsel Trey Allen, he is the Republican opponent. Right before the break, we were speaking about like giving us a little bit more information as to what types of cases will come to the Supreme Court. And just want to ask, we know that cases have been delayed because of COVID. And what are your expectations now that the courts have resumed? And what was the impact of COVID? And that question goes to Counsel Trey Allen.
Yeah, so the impact of COVID on our court system was huge. And one reason is that for significant periods of time, our courts basically ceased to function. When I started as general counsel in January of last year, under our current Chief Justice made it clear that a top priority was getting the courts open again. Because of the closures, our court system had developed a huge backlog of criminal cases and civil cases. And of course, those delays had real world impacts. You had people sitting in jail who might have been innocent. You had people who needed important family custody issues resolved. You had people, who had pending cases, personal injury cases, other kinds of tort cases pending, who needed compensation, who needed justice to be done. And our state constitution actually says in Article 1, Section 18, that the court shall remain open and shall administer right and justice without favor, denial, or delay. So as the general counsel for the court system, I've been involved over the last year and a half plus with efforts to get our courts moving and reduce the backlog. And I'm glad to say that we have made gigantic strides. And that's really, at the general office of the courts, we assist the court officials who are out in the field doing the hard work, and it's really their efforts that have reduced the backlog. But I'm very proud to have been part of the effort to help the courts overcome the backlog that resulted from COVID and the court closures.
Okay, so and the same question to you, Justice Ervin. What are your expectations now that in-person court has resumed, and what impact did you feel came from COVID?
Well, let me take the second part of that question first, and then we will let's talk about the first part of it second. It's the Supreme Court, of course, is a court too, and we continued throughout the period of the COVID, the depths of the COVID pandemic, to work very hard to handle the docket that we've got before us. And for example, in 2020, which was the period of the greatest number of safety measures that were undertaken for the purpose of protecting people from the potential risk of COVID-19. We decided probably as many cases in 2020 as we have in any year in the last 2 or 3 decades. We worked very hard. We're able to switch over to the use of virtual technologies, and I think got our work done in an exemplary fashion, frankly. The greatest impact of the COVID-19 pandemic was felt on the trial courts. Virtual technologies work better, at least it seems to me, in the appellate context than they perhaps do in the trial courts. The decisions that former Chief Justice Beasley made, particularly in 2020, were intended to protect the safety of court personnel and litigants. As the pandemic has eased and steps have been taken to reopen in-person courts, we have started holding in-person oral arguments at the Supreme Court again. The Court of Appeals began doing that before we did. The trial courts had some in-person proceedings almost throughout the pandemic, except for the very early days of it. But there's no question but that the pandemic itself had impact on the rapidity with which cases were dealt with in the courts, and all of us are making an effort moving forward to try to catch up the backlogs that exist and to do the best job that we can to give everybody justice, as Mr. Allen said, without favor or delay.
Okay, so you kind of like alluded to Judge Ervin about the technology. We know that, and I've been speaking with quite a few of the appeals judges, and they've been using the streaming, and their courts are on YouTube. Counsel Allen, tell me how the technology has impacted your ability to function in the courts today. Have you been able to utilize, like I was saying, my grandson wants to be on the phone and he's all over and like, Granny, you don't know about YouTube? So how has technology, and we'll be coming up for the next break, but could you briefly tell us how, Counsel Allen, how's technology impacted your functioning in the courts?
Yes, and I'm with you. My the IT person for my campaign is my 15-year-old son. So,
Okay.
but we had actually North Carolina law put a lot of restrictions on the ability of judges to use technology to conduct remote proceedings by video and audio transmission. During the pandemic, there were emergency orders from the chief justices that allowed more of that. But as we came to the end of those emergency orders, we faced a situation where the courts would no longer have a basis for conducting so many things remotely. And so I helped author new legislation that the General Assembly passed that essentially has allowed the courts to continue using video and audio transmission to conduct more proceedings remotely. And we did that because we feel like that, that really has the potential to increase access to the courts and to make judicial decisions less costly. We're also at the Administrative Office of the Court process of implementing e-courts. The federal courts have had electronic filing for years and years and years, and we don't have much of that in our state courts. So it's 2022, and it's time for e-filing in North Carolina. So we're working hard to make that happen, and that will make it easier for people to access the courts, and it will make it, we hope, cheaper for people to access the courts as well.
Okay, very good. And Judge Ervin, the same thing. How has technology been incorporated into the courts for you?
Well, at least at the Supreme Court, we began having virtual oral argument 2 to 3 months after the pandemic began, and continued to have oral arguments which is our in-court proceeding, virtually without interruption through, I think, November of last year. We have then continued to use virtual oral argument to some extent since that time for various reasons, including counsel who developed COVID right before the argument date. The Court of Appeals began a little bit earlier than we did the same thing. I know the business court made substantial use of video technology and conducted even some trials, as I understand it, using video technology as well. My sense is that video technology is here to stay. There's some things that it is hard to do well virtually, but many of the things that courts routinely do can be done in that fashion. It makes it cheaper for the litigants. It makes it more convenient for the lawyers. And I believe that one of the things that we have learned as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic is how to use virtual technologies better. And we will continue, I think, to make much more extensive use of them in the future than we have in the past.
Okay, so we're coming up for our next break, but I do want to let our listening audience know that Friday, October 14th, if you haven't registered to vote, that will be the last day that you can register to vote. Thursday, October 20th is our first day for early voting. And if you haven't registered, you can register to vote and to also participate. So we're coming up for the first break. Early voting can determine.
This is Dr. Benjamin Shavers, president of the National Association of the Black Press in America. I was born and raised in North Carolina and saw the gains we made in 2020. But I know we've got unfinished business. The time is now to increase resources for our community and advocate for what we need by voting in this election. Early voting begins October the 20th. Get 3 people from your community to vote with you. Visit safevoternc.org for more information. Paid for by the North Carolina Black Alliance.
Election Day is November 8th. Early voting begins October 20th. Do you know the candidates who are campaigning for our vote? Awesome Radio is hosting a non-partisan candidate forum October 11th, Tuesday, from 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Pitt Community College, the Goes Student Center. All candidates have been invited. This candidate forum is free and open to the public. This forum is designed for voter education and for us to get to know the candidates up close and personal before we cast our vote. That's Tuesday, October 11th, 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. at Pitt Community College. If you have questions for the candidates, email them to us, admin@wbisawesomeradio.org or inbox on social media. Visit our website for more information. To volunteer for this event, contact us 252-756-3137. This is another Awesome Radio community event.
Welcome back to Meet the Candidate. My name again is Renee Borston Hill, and I do have the pleasure of having Justice Sam Ervin IV here, and also General Counsel Trey Allen. I want to thank you, gentlemen, again for allowing us to find out more about you, find out why you're running and why you want to serve. And then we also spoke about technology and how it has now impacted and found its way into the courts to make things a lot easier. I fortunately have not had to have the experience to come before you, gentlemen, or have a need for your services. So I've learned a lot about the appeals court, and I'm learning more about the Supreme Court. Not that I can serve, okay? as a grandparent, my expertise is not in your area, and I'm just happy.
It might help out though.
Yeah.
But what I do want to ask is, and I'll direct this to you first, Justice Ervin. What is your juror district philosophy, and how will it support your mission on the Supreme Court? How does it support your mission?
Well, the way I interpret the question, my judicial philosophy is essentially the way that I go about deciding cases. In the North Carolina law, in federal law, not only says what the rules are that are to be applied in cases, but they also describe the way in which cases ought to be decided. Much of what we do involves non-constitutional matters. We have a large amount of our law is called common law, which comes from the English common law that was brought over during the colonial period and was adopted by the General Assembly in the early years of North Carolina. We also have many statutes passed by the General Assembly. Both Mr. Allen and I have alluded to some of that already. And then we have constitutional provisions. What we essentially wind up doing is looking at legal propositions, figuring out what they mean, and then applying them to facts. And my philosophy is pretty simple. I look at the facts are usually established in the trial court. I look at the legal principle that we're talking about. The first thing is look at the words. What does it say? If it's clear, then we don't have to do anything else. We just apply it. If it's not clear, if it can be read in more than one or two ways, what you do is you look at what is the context within which that provision appears. What do other related provisions say? How has it been historically interpreted by other courts before the court that you're sitting on? What was the purpose for which the provision was enacted? And you try to, and what is the historical background against which it was enacted? And you look at all of those things with an attempt not to figure out the way you would write the law yourself, because you're not supposed to do that. We can't always, every judge can't get up there and just make his or her own decisions based upon what he or she thinks the rules ought to be. Instead, we're trying to figure out what does the law mean as intended by those who adopted it? How has it been interpreted since then, so that people will know what they can do and can't do going forward, because laws are in essence the way that we tell each other what we can and can't do in society. That's my philosophy.
Okay. And the same question to you, Counsel Allen. What is your jewel district philosophy, and how will it support your mission on the Supreme Court?
Yeah, judicial philosophy, because it's what keeps a judge acting like a judge and not like a legislator. North Carolina, and it's particularly important on a court like the North Carolina Supreme Court, the Court of Appeal has to follow its own precedents, and it has to follow the decisions of the North Carolina Supreme Court. The North Carolina Supreme Court has the power to overturn its own precedents. So even if it has previously addressed an issue that comes before it, it can change its position. And so, there's a real temptation there sometimes, I think, to use that power to accomplish whatever political ends the judge or the justices think are desirable. And it's a big mistake to use that authority that way. So when it comes to the Constitution, I think that judges need to look at text and the history of whatever is at issue, and be guided by that, and not rewrite the Constitution to fit or to suit whatever the judge thinks it or wishes that it said. When it comes to statutes, the case law in North Carolina says over and over again that that in interpreting statutes, the goal of the court is to give effect to the intent of the legislature. And you start by looking at the words of the statute. If they're clear and unambiguous, the courts have to follow that. Where there's ambiguity, the court can look at the context of the statute, the legislative context in which it was passed, and its relationship to related statutes. But it's all for the purpose of trying to determine what the legislature, not what the court wishes the legislature had intended.
Okay. So I just want both of you to have an opportunity to tell our listening audience what do they need to know to cast their ballot. I would like at that point also, before we run out of time, to also tell our listening audience if, what do you need from them if they want to see you in this position. So we're going to start with you, Justice Ervin. If I'm going to cast my ballot, what do I need to know, and why and how can I support your campaign?
Well, you can. I'm always answering the questions in reverse order from the way you pose them to me, and I apologize. But in terms of what I need from voters, I mean, obviously ultimately at the end of the day, what I wish is for the voters of the state to give me to reelect me to serve on the Supreme Court. It's important, regardless of who you're going to vote for. It is important for everybody to get out and vote. Voting is the way that we determine in our society who holds the offices that make the decisions that are important. And so the main thing I want to encourage everybody to do is to get out and vote for the candidate of your choice, regardless of whether it's me, Mr. Allen, because the more people that vote, the better, it seems to me. Secondly, people can, if they wish to help my campaign, can contact us through our website. I go around, as Mr. Allen does, and make appearances at various places. I'm always happy to communicate with voters one-on-one. I appreciate the chance to participate in forums like this one because it permits us to reach a greater number of voters than would otherwise be the case. And I suspect I can speak for Mr. Allen in saying that we both very much appreciate the chance to be on this and the other programs that he and I both have been on over the last several months. And so what I would like from voters is just, if you have questions, if you want more information, please feel free to contact my campaign. My website is www.ervinforjustice.org. My Facebook page is facebook.com/ervinforjustice. You can reach us through either of those two means, and I'm happy to communicate with folks further. As far as the reason that I would urge voters to support my reelection, I would contend that if you listen to this forum, I hope you've got a sense that I understand the function of the court. I have a pretty clearly defined judicial philosophy that is consistent with the way that I understand that judges are supposed to function. I have a substantial amount of judicial or quasi-judicial experience, which lasts over the past 23 years. I've got an extensive record of deciding cases based fairly and impartially. And I would point out that there are two lawyer groups who have endorsed candidates in this race. They typically oppose each other in court. One is the Advocates for Justice. The other is the defense lawyers.
Okay.
Both of them have endorsed my candidacy.
All right. Thank you. And this, Counsel Trey Allen, I'm going to ask you the same question. What do I need to know about to cast my ballot, about you, and give me more information about your campaign and how it can be supported?
Sure. I'm happy to do that. And I'd like to echo Justice Ervin's comments, thanking you for making this forum available. And I'd like to thank everyone who's watching and listening to it. It's so vital that people care about courts and about judicial elections in North Carolina. So over the past few years, the North Carolina Supreme Court has come to be regarded by many people increasingly as a body that is making partisan decisions instead of following the law. I think that's terrible for the court. I think it's terrible for our justice system. So I'm to make the court a court that it does not or isn't even perceived to be acting from partisan motives. And so if that's what I want in a justice, I would invite them to consider voting for me. They can find out more information about me and my background at my website, which is www.treyallennc.com. And just to sort of add on to something I said before, talking about my record as a school of government faculty member, I wrote on a wide range of North Carolina legal issues. A lot of that scholarship's available online. People can look it up, and if they look at that, I think they'll see that you can't tell from anything I wrote as a faculty member what my party is. You won't find any politics in anything that I wrote. It's just the honest attempt of an individual to analyze the law and reach sound conclusions about what the law requires. And that's the approach I would bring to the North Carolina Supreme Court.
Okay. Well, again, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being hopefully comfortable to speak with our listening audience. And if they have missed any part of this, it can always be found on the Awesome Radio website, so that it can be played continuously, because I really feel that this was a good conversation that we've had. Again, just want to remind our listening audience that early voting can determine a race, and it starts October the 20th. It ends Saturday, November the 5th. The general election, and we hope that nobody waits that long, will be November the 8th. And then also just another question to keep us going. We still have a little bit of time, but I just wanted to get certain information out there because I had a lot of questions, but I only needed a few because you've been so informative. What about, and I'm going to give this first to you, Justice Ervin, what about your style that makes you a good Supreme Court judge?
Well, in terms of style is, I guess, in the eye of the beholder to some extent, but I listen. I actively engage with the people who are trying to communicate with me. I work very hard. I think my reputation is of one who knows the record, knows the law, and tries to take very, very seriously everything that comes before the court, because I understand that the cases that we hear involve real people, and what we do has real impact on their lives, and that means we need to take what we do very seriously. I hope my style suggests that I do that.
Okay. And for you, Councilman Trey Allen, what about your style that would you bring to the Supreme Court if you're elected?
Well, no one's ever accused me of being stylish.
Same here. Same here.
Would I be afraid to stand before you?
That is maybe the best question that I've gotten in any forum. So thank you for that. As I've said, my style is to do my absolute best, determine what the law is, leave my personal preferences, my political views out of my legal analysis. As general counsel for the courts, I mentioned near the beginning that my office gives legal guidance to judges, clerks of court, and
okay.
Oops.
Yes.
I give guidance to people regardless of party. I give guidance to Democrats. I give guidance to Republicans. That just doesn't play a role in my legal analysis and wouldn't play a role in my analysis on the court.
All righty. So again, this is Meet the Candidate. My name is Renee Borston Hill, and I've had the pleasure of speaking with today in a conversation with Justice Sam Ervin, who is the incumbent and running for re-election, and his opponent at this time is General Counsel Trey Allen. This interview, should you miss any of it, can be repeated continuously to get more information. And I just want to thank, and we do have more time, so that what I would like to ask, I don't want to run out of time. I'd like to ask you, Counsel Trey Allen, tell us a little bit, or let me just ask you this real question, how I speak it, how I present it, because it'll give people, tell us something that we don't know about you, Councilman Allen.
Wow, there's a whole long list of boring. I'll tell you a couple things. My wife and I homeschool. I mean, it's really more my wife who does that. So we have a really close family, and I love being. And I'm also so boring that I taught myself to read Latin. So if you want boring on the, I'm your man.
Okay. All right. And Justice Ervin, tell us something that we don't know about you.
Well, and other people might say that I could give Mr. Allen a run for his money on the boring side.
Okay.
But as a couple of things that most people don't know about me, one may not be boring, one may be. I'll leave it to your readers or listeners to decide. But in my spare time, when I have any, I referee high school and middle school and age school soccer matches and get out there, and that will be a way to keep yourself humble, because the sports fans have no idea who you are, and therefore they will say anything and do anything and yell at me just like they yell at every other official. But it's a lot of fun. The other thing that people would not probably know about me is I love the outdoors. For somebody who sits behind a desk all day, that may be surprising, but my older son and I have spent several years and climbed all 40 mountains in the Southeast that are over 6,000 feet tall. And it was a great bonding experience. Plus, being in the outdoors is a beautiful place to be. And as a resident of Western North Carolina in the mountains, it's one of my absolute favorite things to do, but most people wouldn't know that I did that.
Okay. And okay, just like the last question probably we'll have time for. Should there be term limits for judges? And I'll ask that question to you, Councilman Trey Allen.
I don't think that that's really for me to say. Our state constitution doesn't impose them. Of course, the people of North Carolina have the ability to change that. So that's not for me to say. That's policy that's up to the legislature and the people.
All right. And Justice Ervin, do you feel that there should be term limits in justices in the courts?
And I'm going to give you essentially the same answer. Mr. Allen and I both got asked this question, I think, in the first candidate forum that we did, and he gave the answer he just gave, and I think I'm going to give the one I gave at that time, too. There is a limit in the sense that North Carolina General Assembly, with constitutional authority, has enacted a mandatory age limit so that you have to retire at a certain point.
Okay.
But beyond that, there's no constitutional limitation. You would have to amend the Constitution. That's a process that involves issues of public policy. And typically, I don't comment on issues of public policy because those issues may come before me when I'm on the court, and I don't want to be perceived to have prejudged the outcome in any case I may have heard.
Okay. Well, thank you for that remark. And then closing remarks, Councilman Trey Allen, you have like about 30. I'll give you 30 seconds for the closing remarks.
Thank you. Again, I'm so grateful to you and to the listeners and viewers of this program for taking the time to devote attention to our race. I've been very blessed in my life, and as I lean in with educational opportunities and career opportunities, I'm proud to serve my country in the Marine Corps. I'd be honored to serve my state on the Supreme Court. And if elected, I would do my absolute best to follow the law and leave my personal views at the door.
Okay. And Justice Ervin, your closing remarks?
And my closing would be similar to my opening. I am also very blessed to have been a citizen of this state. It has been the honor of my life to serve on the Supreme Court for the last nearly 8 years. I believe that I've got a 23-year record of doing what I say I do, which is decide cases fairly and impartially without taking political considerations into account.
And I just want to thank both of you.
Election Day is November 8th. Early voting begins October 20th. Do you know the candidates who are campaigning for our vote? Awesome Radio is hosting a nonpartisan candidate